I'm Heather May. I'm the director of the Great Salt Lake Collaborative, which is a solutions journalism initiative in Utah in which 12 newsrooms work together to cover the ecological and public health crisis of the shrinking Great Salt Lake.
And I'm Marcy Young-Cancio, a journalism professor at the University of Utah and founder of Amplify Utah, which was a founding member of the Great Salt Lake Collaborative. And for the last 4 years, I've been working on student-centered collaborative projects with local news media, so this is kind of a really cool full circle thing that we've been able to do. So if you're already part of a collaborative in a professional newsroom, this is kind of a next step on how to expand to the classroom, a 2.0 kind of next gen, if you will. So we started this by bringing our partners together. The Great Salt Lake Collaborative and the College of Humanities at the University of Utah started talking. We brought in Amplify Utah and started building the class. It was new, but we had a base to build on. There was an existing semester-long capstone class that had already been developed to focus on communities that are undercovered in local media. And we knew that the collaborative could more meaningfully cover neighborhoods by the lake that tend to be the most diverse communities in Salt Lake City, as well as indigenous voices as they relate to water. So that's where we put our reporting focus.
We created the class for a couple of reasons. We wanted to expand what it means to collaborate by involving our local university. We wanted to create new pathways to newsrooms for student journalists, and we wanted to help the collaborative. So this class helped us financially, it helped sustain us in our third year. It helped create content for newsrooms, and it was really exciting to see a fresh perspective from students about the lake. And we wanted to reach college students, which are a new audience, with our work.
So this was a brand new approach. We took several months to line up the best teachers and to define what the roles would be because we had a lot of players involved. As the professor at the U, I was handling the liaison between the university and the collaborative. I built the rubrics, the assignments, identified some reading, did all of the line-by-line edits, grading, lectured, and was that main student contact. Heather, as the director of the Great Salt Lake Collaborative, did all things lake. She identified readings that came from the collaborative, readings, video, audio, as our textbook for the course. She built the panels, recruited speakers, found listening session participants, helped with the editing, and gave feedback. And we also worked with Darren Perry, who's on the right here. He's the former chairman of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation in Utah. And he helped guide us on best practices and principles for ethically working with our indigenous communities and sources in this story.
We started the class like we started the Great Salt Lake Collaborative. We held Meet the Lake panel discussions in which we invited scientists, lake biologists, and environmental advocates to class to talk about dust from the dry lake bed, to talk about lake ecology, the lake's cultural history, and the disproportionate impacts a shrinking lake will have on certain neighborhoods. We wanted to accelerate the reporting process for the students. We involved journalists in the class in a couple of ways. We paired them with students as mentors who offered feedback on their stories. Students read and watched journalism created by the collaborative as part of their assignments, and journalists spoke to the class about solutions journalism and how they approach certain stories.
So once they had this baseline, a lake kind of 101, which was the same introduction to the lake that our professional journalists got, students got to work. They started with listening sessions, pulled and adapted from resources by Trusting News. Because the literal name of this class is Voices of Utah, we wanted to start by listening to the voices. We asked students simply to listen. They did no reporting to be able to start understanding the issues and building trust. Then, after those listening sessions, they applied everything that they had learned. They had done a field trip to the lake, they had these panels of experts, they had the listening sessions, and started pitching. Some of the listening session folks, like Kyle Matthews, who's talking to one of our students here, became sources. Students worked on 2 enterprise stories with 4-ish weeks for each. But there were a bunch of challenges. We found that students had a variety of abilities, despite prerequisites to get into the course. Some had never done any reporting from the field. Others had never been asked to write a story for publication, and others were seasoned. One is now the editor-in-chief of the student-run news organization, and another one just snagged a new job as a journalist. So we learned that we needed to be patient and kind of roll with it. We took notes to be able to adapt both in the future, and so in this course, some students ended up doing the 2 stories, others did 1, and we gave them more time to do additional reporting, additional revisions, because our goal was to create and to publish strong, thoroughly reported, well-written and produced stories. And we adapted. The students were all better for it, and so was the collaborative.
So 12 written stories were produced, plus a 3-episode podcast. All of the work was published on the Great Salt Lake Collaborative's website by Amplify Utah and by several newsrooms, including the Salt Lake Tribune, Utah Public Radio, and KSL News Radio. Stories were produced about recreation on the lake, warehouse development over wetlands, arts and culture, a youth advocacy organization, and indigenous relationships with water and the lake. And a community radio station invited 3 students on to talk about the class and their stories, and they played one of the podcast episodes.
So our recommendation would also be to show off a little bit. We wanted to make sure that the dean, who dedicated money in terms of collaborative funds, paid panelist honorariums, listening session stipends, saw the impact and success. So we ended by throwing a showcase celebration, which acted as the students' final, where they gave flash talks on what they learned and did. The dean and the executive director of the Salt Lake Tribune were invited to talk briefly about what this collaboration means for the newsrooms and for students. We invited the mentors, sources, listening session folks, the collaborative newsrooms, faculty from the college to be able to get a real sense of what this was. Many people came up to us and said that they didn't really understand exactly what the collaborative was doing until we did this presentation. So we really showed that there's a way to create a model to build on. We're developing an intermediate journalism course right now to bring in additional Great Salt Lake Collaborative projects. We created the first ever Utah College Media Collaborative, bringing together 4 universities to cover on a totally different issue, but very much inspired by the Great Salt Lake Collaborative. And then we expanded other community-engaged collaborative courses as well, building and building and building, showing there's tons of opportunities.
So if you have any questions, please stay in touch, and you can go to greatsaltlakenews.org to see all of our work, as well as amplifyutah.org. Thanks.